Hello everybody. Today we're going to be going into how to calculate a duration between two different dates, how to sum those different dates up, how to sum those values up, how to get an average between those two dates. Essentially just how to use the DATEDIFF function is really what we're going to be focusing on. So I don't know if you guys have bumped into this, but when I was starting out with Power BI, one of my biggest issues was using some of these date functions within DAX. When you're using some of the date functions, you aren't always able to use a date value, and sometimes I was confused as to why. So I kind of just want to go through how to use one of the big, most used values, such as DATEDIFF, so that we can understand how it's used and what we need to do to make sure it works properly within our models and within your DAX calculations. So if you've ever used the DATEDIFF calculation, you know that you can't just specify a date table, right? Or you can't just specify a field value. You need to either use a min or a max, and you need to specify a specific date. Or the other solution that we're going to be going through is you can use iterating functions. So when you use an iterating function, such as an average x or a sum x, every line item will reference a specific date, right? So then you can use an actual date field from the table that you're iterating through, as opposed to getting an aggregated min or a max in kind of the way that I used to do it when I was starting out with Power BI, because I didn't understand it fully. So let's get into our model real quick, show us what we're going to do, and then we can start working through the DAX calculation. So looking at what our calculation does here, just as a little sample, so we've got the vacancies. We can see kind of the average value of each of the individual values underneath that, and then same thing, the line item above is just the client. So then again, that same average of all of those individual date differences between our start and our book date, right? So all we're doing is just taking that DATEDIFF value between these two dates and then averaging them up. But then at the single line item for replacement, that value is going to be its actual value, because the average of itself is just itself, right? So let's get into our model real quick. So we've got a client going into a vacancy and going into a placement. So imagine a recruiting world, a recruiting firm, and this data is for a recruiting firm. We've got clients, they give us job offers or vacancies, and then we fill those vacancies with a placement, right? And then revenue comes in for those vacancies based on the placement that was made, right? And so placements have a relationship to the book date of the placement, and again, we're just taking the difference between those two dates. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and create a new page here, and we'll just throw on what we need. So we've got the placement ID, the start date, and the book date. So we've got the placement ID and then the two values that we're going to be trying to get the date difference of. Let's switch these two up. All right, so what we want to do first is let's go ahead and show you what I mean with the date difference calculation. Duration between two dates, and let's go ahead with just this for now. All right, so if we just try to use the DATEDIFF function without any iterating function or anything like that, and we want to try to call one of these fields from our placement table, it won't pop up, right? So if we just type in B to try to get book date to show up, book date does not show up, right? It's not even an option. We can scroll through all of the options and it doesn't come up. We don't have the ability to set our date 1 as the field we want to set it to. And again, that's because we can't choose an aggregated date, right? There's no way to aggregate a date. So you either need to do a min or a max, and then you'll be able to select a field, right? So you can select a field based on a min or a max or a selected value, but again, then you're not going to be iterating through every single value, and you might, when your value starts getting summarized and aggregated, then you're going to have values that don't actually make sense. So what we need to do, instead of using a min or a max, what we can do is use, again, that iterating function. Let's just start out with a sum x. So within these iterating functions, what we're going to do is we're going to specify that table. So first, we're going to specify the table, and we're just on the placement table. That's where our book date and our start dates are coming from. And then once we've got our table specified, what we're going to do is then do our expression. So now within our DATEDIFF calculation, if we go ahead and type in B, now we can see that it does pop up, right? So now we've got that field that we can select from, and we don't have to choose a min. So when we aggregate, our values aren't going to be all funky, and we're comparing the min value of a placement on a client to some other min value, right? We can actually get the sum of all of the different values between each individual placement. So if we choose that first as our first date, so that first date is going to be our starting date, right? So this is going to be where we start, and then our second date is going to be our ending date. And then in the interval, you can specify a bunch of different intervals, right? So day, hour, week, total bunch of different options. Let's just go with day here. And great, so once that's done, now you can see we've done what we wanted to do, right? So each placement is now giving us the value between the difference in those two dates, right? So each line item is showing us that difference. And then if we wanted to show that aggregated value, so if we wanted to drop in the client name, we have the option of doing that now, and then we can see that we sum all of those individual placement values up into that one client now, right? So for this specific example, the sum doesn't make total sense, right? But for other examples, great, sum x might work between your two dated diff values, and there you go, that's what you need. Total of 1141 days for some action to happen for that client, right? Or if we want to see how long on average it's taking for these two things to happen, or how long it's taken for this placement to start after it's been booked for a specific client, there we go. Now we have that value, right? So on average, we're booking placements 47 days before their start date. Whether that's good or not, you can do some further analysis on kind of comparing to other clients. Is that high? Is that low? Where do you sit in the industry, right? Then you can start kind of building some additional analysis around this very basic function, right? But just starting out, there you go. That's kind of how you do some data diff functions, to how you can compare some values and some dates across date tables or across tables, so that you can find some quick insights into some efficiency metrics or some other metrics to try to help build out your reporting insights. So hopefully that was helpful in getting started with using some of those date functions within DAX, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.